Welcome to my channel, Ro Can Sew. I'm Ro, and this episode is my favorite ever scrap project that I made for myself. So, my favorite scrap project that I ever made for myself happens to be the shirt that I'm wearing right now. First, I'll start off with the pattern that I used itself. This is just a boxy top. This is the Agustina Boxy top, which is a free pattern from fabricstore.com. So this pattern just has a front piece, a back piece, and sleeve cuffs, and the neckline is just bias bound. So I first dumped out all of my linen scraps and I sifted through the box and I collected all the colors that I thought pleased my eye and went well together. And I formed a pile of those scraps. For this project, for some reason, I wanted to make it hard on myself, I guess. I decided that I wanted to keep my scraps as intact as possible. So I tried to look at them as already existing puzzle pieces. And my job was to try to figure out how to fit those pieces together to make an imagery that was pleasing to my eye using as few cuts with scissors as possible. So in order for me to be able to accomplish that and have a way to sew the scraps together if I was going to combine them in that manner, I thought that it would be a good idea to have a base layer to attach the scraps to. So I started off with some cotton muslin because it was lightweight, it was white. I cut out the front and back pattern pieces from the muslin. I laid it on my cutting board next to each other, and then I proceeded to go through my linen scraps and pick out various pieces and randomly lay them on top of the cotton muslin, tried to cut them as little as possible. And I just tried shuffling them around until I got an overall piece that seemed pleasing to my eye. I did lay my front and back pattern piece next to each other, not only to be able to put these scraps on top of them, but so that I could see how the picture, as I'll call it, flowed from the front to the back over the side seams, because I wanted the scene that I was creating to kind of be continuous around the circumference of the shirt. Once I had the front and back pattern pieces filled up with the scraps that I wanted to use, I then pinned the scraps in place, and I used a lot of pins, and it hadn't occurred to me at the time to use glue. I would say if anyone does try this, it might be worth it to consider using some sort of washable glue to help keep the scrap pieces in place. In hindsight, that probably would have been a lot easier. Pins don't work well under the machine, especially the amount that I used, and they draw blood. So just putting that out there. Because of the number of pins that I used, I did decide that it would be a good idea to baste these scraps in place. So I hand basted with very large stitches over all of the scrap pieces to the backing piece, just to keep them generally in place so that it wouldn't shift around too much as I was moving the pattern pieces to and from my machine and maneuvering it underneath my needle. And then I just sewed the scrap pieces onto the backing using a zigzag stitch. I just was trying to be very careful not to pull and tug on the fabric. I do have sections where, even though this might look like all blue here, there might be several pieces of blue scraps in that area to give a general larger section of blue, as it were. So, and even with the green, there might be a few pieces of the green pieced together or laid together to create this green section. But all of the pieces were then zigzagged in place, and it looks like, I couldn't actually remember this, but yeah, it looks like in the areas that I kept the color the same, I tried to use the matching thread so that the zigzagging wouldn't stand out in those areas, so the patches of color would seem more consistent. So once I had all of the scraps sewn to the backing, the front and back backing pieces, I then laid those out together and decided where I wanted to go from there. The image didn't look complete at that point. It still seemed like it was missing something. So I thought about trying to accent all of the borders where the colored patches connected. So I tried a few different things. I first strung up some beads. I tried some different types of cording that I had, and I just played around with laying the cording or the string of beads over the border of each section of colored scraps. I had some random sequins lying around, so I tried putting sequins in a few places to see if I thought that was going to be pleasing. And what I ultimately ended up doing after a lot of trial and error and just laying different things down and playing around with it was I decided to outline all of the sections with just white linen strips. I used some of the white linen that I had left over, and I just cut it into strips. I zigzagged it and sewed it around all of the dividing lines between each of the colored sections on the shirt. I did not tuck in the edges or serge the edges or do anything like that. I just did a really wide zigzag. I went back and did smaller zigzags. I did a lot of stitching to hold everything in place, but I kept the edges free so that they could kind of fray, so that all of the outlines are kind of frayed. There are sections where there's, threads hanging, and I kind of liked that element that gave to the top. So I went about sewing all of that on. When I finished my shirt, I just used a white cuff to finish the sleeves. I just used the white bias binding to finish the neckline. And the hemline, I extended the length of this shirt by adding a few inch high piece of linen to both the front and the back pieces, and I frayed the edge. I created a vent on the bottom hems because I was using some scraps. The front and back bottom piece isn't exactly cut on grain, so I just took my seam ripper and just really kind of poked it into the fabric and dragged it down to create a very uneven, very jagged hem on this shirt. And then above that is where I did a few rows of decorative stitching because I just wasn't sure if how far the fray would continue to go over repeated washings. As it turns out, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's kind of stayed in place, so that wasn't really didn't need to be a concern of mine, but I didn't know at the time, so that's what I did. It has held up well in the wash, probably due to the amount of stitching that I've put on it. I will say it's a little bit heavier than my other shirts because it does have the scrap layer of fabric, which is sitting on top of the base layer of muslin. But linen is very breathable, and this is not heavyweight linen, and the muslin is very lightweight and thin, so yeah, it's not too bad. I wouldn't wear it on a super hot day just because of the layers, but yeah, I like this shirt. I like the colors, I like the fabrics, and I'm pleased with it. So that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed hearing how I went about creating this project. If you feel inspired in some way to create your own scrap project in this manner, or if you just enjoyed watching this video and hearing how I created this, could you please give me a thumbs up so that I know that you liked it? Maybe tell me so in the comments what you liked about this video. And if you have not already subscribed, could you please consider subscribing to my channel? And that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, bye!